Welcome back to the TelecomTV Cloud Native Telco Summit and our live Q&A show. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content, and this is the first of 2 live Q&A shows today, and we have another one coming up in round about 90 minutes time. So there's still plenty of opportunity for you to quiz our panelists and guests. Now, we've just seen the panel discussion that looked at the roadmap towards a fully cloud native telco. And now we're going to expand on those topics, answer whatever questions you have, and dig a little deeper into the subject. If you haven't yet sent in a question, then please do so now using the Q&A form on the website. As always, your co-host for our live Q&A shows is Ray the Maistre, Editorial Director here at TelecomTV. Ray, as evidenced by our panel discussion, we've made great progress towards cloud native, but there's still a lot to do.
Yes, Guy, it's still very early doors, as they say in the theatre and football worlds. There's a lot of best practice to figure out, a lot of reskilling to be done, and we've only really just scratched the surface of cloud native telco. But every month there are new examples of real world progress and not just plans and aspirations. And that's very encouraging from the industry. The telecom world really is a-changing.
Yes, and it's long overdue. Now all we have to do is figure out exactly how to go about it and then get on and do it. Thanks, Ray. Now let's meet our guests who have returned to help answer all your questions. And joining us live on the programme today are Nathan Rader, who is VP Cloudified Production at Deutsche Telekom, Bijoy Pankajakshan, EVP Chief Technology and Strategy Officer at Mavenir, Manish Singh, CTO Telecom Systems Business at Dell Technologies, Randy Cox, Head of Product Management Intelligent Cloud at Wind River, and Chris Viduris, Chief Technology and Information Officer at Neos Networks. Hello everyone, welcome back. That was a terrific panel discussion we had earlier. So let's now take a look at our audience questions. Ray, do you have our first one?
Yes, I do. Thanks very much, Guy. And the question that's come in says, all the speakers during the summit appear to be in agreement that cloud native requires CI/CD, DevOps, and so on. But we're still hearing that operators are not ready to implement and upgrade software very frequently, and some are still waiting 18 months. Nathan, perhaps we can start with you and get your views here first. If that's an accurate assessment, what can motivate the whole industry to move faster in this respect?
Yeah, thanks. I do think it is an accurate assessment in some cases. You know, not in all cases, but in some cases, we're still having a difficult time and challenge upgrading and ensuring that all of our upgrades are aligned and coming at the right time. Deutsche Telekom has started some work with some of the hyperscalers actually to remedy this task, because the hyperscalers don't give us the option to sit and just wait for 18 months. You know, if we're lucky, we get 3 to 4 months before we have to move to the next upgrade, and that is going to cause us to move quite quickly. But of course, it's not something we can do alone. It's something we need to do with our vendor partners for the CNFs. They're going to have to test and work with hyperscalers to ensure that the lifecycle management is meeting the speeds and that they are able to move things forward. That being said, though, there are some benefits there, because the one thing that a hyperscaler does do is they provide a common cloud. So the cloud infrastructure that's in the vendor labs is the same cloud infrastructure that's in our labs. So as we do the testing, we're essentially testing on the same software at the same time, which isn't always the case with current clouds today, which does leave us to that 18 months, because while the vendors and the CNFs may be tested on one config, there's going to be some sort of snowflake typically in our labs as an operator, and therefore that whole round of testing needs to be sort of revalidated instead of just some simple tests that could be done with a hyperscaler. So that's kind of how we're looking at it today, but that's not, of course, the only approach we're taking, but it's something we're very much investigating at the time being to see if that could help us move forward and kind of get past this 18-month bump as you describe it.
Okay, interesting, Nathan. And interesting you mentioned that because actually on TelecomTV just today we've run a story quoting an executive from Orange saying that the telco cloud currently is a bit of a nightmare due to a lack of synchronicity between the different parts of the industry. So does anybody else want to come in on this question about whether or how we can get the industry to accelerate with the telco cloud, or if not, we can just move on to the next audience question? Yeah, no, I think we're just going to move on. So Guy, I'll hand over to you for the next question.
Yep, thank you, Ray. As you say, we do have a lot of questions to get through today, but we want to give each one its due respect and due time. Manish, perhaps this one here we could ask you this one first. The question is, what specific aspects or areas of AI ML technology are relevant for building and operating intent-based, autonomous and automated networks? So Manish, are you able to give us some views to start us off?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Guy. I mean, I think the potential here of applying AI and machine learning is really, really broad. I mean, and I would say across the technology stack. Just in the interest of time, I'll keep it short and give two quick examples. One, if you look at the infrastructure layer, the opportunity really with all this telemetry data is to really start to look at how you can start to predict faults, and beyond just start to predict faults, to actually start to realize the closed loop control for automatic remediation of those faults. And that's at the infrastructure layer. We move up in the workloads, just taking RAN as an example, with the RIC and AX apps. I mean, there's a whole host of opportunity to apply AI and machine learning. Areas include applying machine learning in areas like SON for coverage capacity optimization or mobility optimization, to in case of massive MIMO for beamforming and multi-user pairing, for example. And in case of energy optimization, sustainability is front and center, and there's a whole host of opportunity to take all this telemetry data and start applying machine learning for driving better energy optimization, energy utilization on the network, both at the application layer as well as down on the infrastructure. So it's a broad scope.
Great. Thanks, Manish, for going through all those. There's obviously a lot we can do there. Bijoy, you'd like to come in on this question and share your views as well?
Sure, thank you. It's a great question because AI/ML is an evolving field, and there are a lot of areas within the operator network where this could apply. It started initially with applications on the customer care side, so having chatbots that are AI-based to engage with customers, but now you're seeing it more applicable within the core of the network as well. As Manish addressed, on the infrastructure side, you've got the RCA, root cause analysis, be it predictive or proactive type of RCAs. RIC is another great area which is very specific to the Open RAN based deployment and gives the intelligence within the RAN to be able to automate the network on the RAN side. Another area is within the 5G core, something called the Network Data Function Analytics, NWDAF. It's another area that we're looking at with a lot of promise for use of AI/ML, because it's able to stitch together telemetry information from all parts of the network, the core, the RAN, as well as applications, and you could then have meaningful information to run and automate the network. So at a high level, I would say infrastructure, OSS, customer care, as well as RIC, and then NWDAF would be areas that we see operators invest in AI/ML.
Yeah, thanks, Bijoy. And we heard something similar yesterday as well about some of those initiatives and areas, and I think we'll keep our eye on this, and I'm sure we'll develop it further in our Network Automation Summit, which is coming up later this year. So if no one else wants to comment on this particular question, I think we've perhaps covered that one. So Ray, let me hand across to you for our next viewer question.
Okay, thanks, Guy, and good plug for the Network Automation Summit there. Well done. Right, so the next question we've got is also focused on a little bit on observability, coming from some of the topics discussed yesterday. Bijoy, maybe we can come to you to start this one off. And the question is, when observability is discussed, it seems like the emphasis is on the mobile core platform. But what is your take on the radio access network observability and the correlation between that and the mobile core? Bejoy, any insights on this?
Sure. So I think a lot of the reasons why people say observability is more tied to the core is because the standalone core, as defined in the specifications, is already a services-based architecture. So it gives the flexibility to deploy in a containerized deployment with observability natively available in Kubernetes to be able to leverage that capability. But at the same time, today, when we look at the Open RAN deployments that are happening, they're all happening in Kubernetes Cloud Native deployments. Taking Dish as a good example, there's so much investment that's actually gone into making sure that you have the right amount of logging that's available. The Prometheus agents are installed in the right agents. And you're collecting all this data and you're able to analyze this, because the end goal, if you cannot scale out and scale in these applications, you're not really realizing the benefits of cloud native deployment. So unless you have true observability and true telemetry implemented, that's how you could let the closed loop automation implemented, because you know at what CPU utilization, at what memory utilization, what application metrics should trigger a scale and a scale out operation as an example. And then correlating this end to end is where NWDAF or something like a RIC could come in, where the information that's available from the RAN side can be correlated with information that comes from the core. And you could do more end-to-end analytics. And this is something that we're looking even beyond 5G, when every aspect of the network, be it the air interface, the RAN, the core, would have AI/ML aspects. And to be able to get all this data and mine meaningful information coming out of this data, you need true observability. So I would say for cloud native deployments, the fundamental need would be to have observability. And this is another reason why cloud native is so important, because you don't want tools which are very specific to certain parts of your network. So if you use tools which are very specific to a vendor for the RAN, and you cannot reuse those tools for the cloud native deployments that don't have in the core, your expense goes up. And at the same time, you cannot leverage some of these new benefits which come out by being able to stitch together information that comes from different parts of the network.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points, Bejoy. And I guess this topic will crop up more and more as radio access networks become more open, more of those disaggregated systems are deployed. Manish, you wanted to come in on this topic as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to build on Bijoy's point. I think the opportunities in the RAN, to be honest with you, are even broader than in any other part of the network. And as I was indicating earlier, if you look at the scope, I mean, once you get all this telemetry data and you start to bring that together, areas to optimize the network for coverage, capacity, for robust mobility, all the way as we take these radio access networks more towards massive MIMO in terms of beamforming, in terms of user pairing. These are all areas of opportunity on the RAN side, and not to forget the sustainability aspects in terms of energy optimization and more. So I think the opportunity area, I would argue, in the radio access network are even broader in terms of observability and the applications that can be enabled through that. And the good news is the architecture starts to enable that. Where we are is obviously, in this journey is, first of all, getting the RAN containerized, disaggregated, get all of that technology matured, and start to bring all this data up and start realizing these applications. So, I think the potential here is huge. And to your point, yes, there's got to be a lot more discussion. I also expect in the months and years ahead around observability and what's potential in the radio access network.
Okay, fantastic. And Randy, you wanted to come here too.
Yeah, I was just thinking, as both Bejoy and Manish were speaking, and Manish mentioned it, where we are today is one aspect, and then the opportunity. Because where we are today, we're, I think in real life deployments, we're still working at a very low level in terms of observability around the platform layer of the stack, and ensuring the network health is there. And And so that is at the most foundational, basic level. But the opportunity as we move up in northbound into the stack with the actual RAN workload and being able to really look and have a sea or a data lake of data to be able to manage the network from a RAN workload perspective. And then beyond that, to really take advantages of the promise of 5G is to use that data in a way that has your network performing at the maximum capability. So I think there's a long ways to go there around observability and how we actually use that to manage the network. So it is a great opportunity. I agree with both of the gentlemen.
Yes, I think we're only at the early stages of this, and of course, as progress is made with things like the 5G standalone core and more open radio access networks, well, that's when all the network operators get to find out what is possible and what they can see and how they can use the data. So a lot of findings still to come in the industry. Okay, thanks very much for those answers. I'm going to hand back over to you, Guy, for the next part of the program.
Yep, thank you very much, Ray. It's time to check in on our audience poll for this year's Cloud Native Telco Summit. So, one question, 7 answer options, and you can pick whichever ones you feel are the most relevant. And the question we are asking is, Cloud Native is set to deliver substantial benefits to telcos, but what are the main challenges to its adoption? And here you can see the real-time votes. Obviously, they don't all add up to 100%. That's because you can vote for multiple choices. So if we look at some of the roadmap related choices there, lack of management support doesn't seem to be a problem, but that last choice there, unsure how to best implement Cloud Native, that's a rather alarming number of votes. 48% of people who have voted have cited that as a problem. Not good. Now, if you have yet to vote, then please do so, because the more votes we get, the better. And we will be keeping the polls open until the end of the summit. Okay, back to the Q&A, because we've got another, about 20 minutes or so remaining. Plenty of time for more questions. So over to you, Ray.
Okay, thanks very much, Guy. I just want to pick up on the poll there and the fact that there are so many votes for unsure how best to implement Cloud Native. Nearly 50% of the people who have voted have gone for that option. And we can't really have a roadmap unless we know how to start one. So how do we overcome this major challenge? Randy, any thoughts from you there? I mean, it's not really a chicken and egg situation here. I mean, the industry must know how to start this process, surely, by now.
Sure. I think that's a very broad question, so I will rely on the help of the co-panelists here. But I think there's a couple of areas at a very basic level, process and people, if you think about that. From a people perspective, you noticed on there was I think it was 56% or 50% lack of skills in the engineering team. So I think that's a critical aspect of this, obviously, to have the right people who understand what Cloud Native is and to actually be able to implement that. And not only the right skill set, but the mindset as well, that this is a shift from what we've done in the past in terms of, if you want to look at legacy architecture and tradition. So you need the right people with the right skill set and mindset there. And then in addition, obviously, the majority of your processes will change while the fundamentals might be similar in terms of requirements, development, and test. The actual architecture itself is different, but how you actually go about the implementation of that development and then actually deploying that in your network, a massive change for operators as well. So not only the vendors from a development perspective, but from an operator standpoint, their processes for validating the incoming software and capabilities to actually rolling that out are going to have to change as we have experienced over the last a couple of years.
Yeah, great observations there, Randy. And Chris, you wanted to come in on this. I guess it's it's different for every different kind of network operator here about how to approach this. So, why do you think so many people have selected this as an issue?
I think it's always difficult when you start around cloud native, especially how you establish DevOps culture and practices. I would say from my experience, it's good to start with a small project, something that has a good business case. Then look at developing your tool chain, your DevOps delivery pipeline. Start to get the teams used to CI/CD type of practices, if you like, and then demonstrate success. Bring some business outcome close to that cloud native project or close to that DevOps of practice, and then scale to other projects and platforms. And I think as if you like, your practices mature, your culture improves, you get to attract more talent into the organization. So in a way, you start with a small step or small project, but then you grow out of that, and you bring the business outcome, so people realize there's value in this cloud native development and following more closely to more like DevOps type of culture and tool chains.
Yes, great. Thanks, Chris. And Manish, what's your view here? Why do you think there's this unsureness in the industry, this hesitation?
Yeah, I'm actually not surprised seeing that poll number, to be honest, having lived both the telco and the hyperscaler worlds. I can see that this can be a challenging journey. I think the thing I'll say is what's different between the way the hyperscalers approach cloud native versus the telcos. Hyperscalers have gone about building a lot of technology in-house. I think that's fundamentally different for the telcos, and they really need to think what are the key partners that they want to bring together to really start this journey. I think there are some good examples earlier in the Q&A. Dish was mentioned. I think that's a great example to look at the way they've been going about building their network right from the get-go, right from the start. It's cloud native. Now, one could argue that's a greenfield. But there are brownfield operators as well who have started the journey. I mean, Vodafone's a great example of that, how they're going about working with Dell, with Wind River and others to really start their cloud native journeys on the RAN. As they are disaggregating and driving the open RAN. Now, the challenges, they are there. They are across the board. Challenges, and there's a good paper Vodafone published. So, in terms of integration at the site, integration at the NOC, and how as you start to disaggregate and make the network more cloud native, these are some of the challenges. And I think the sum in substance of all of this literally comes down to people and process. There's got to be skill set transformation. There's got to be process transformation that the telcos have to go through. And that's a journey. And that journey has started. But I think, it's going to take time as they start, maturing on their cloud native journeys.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great points again. And Bijoy, you wanted to come in here too.
So a lot of good points made by the panelists. I'd also add to it that part of this was also the confusion that happened before the Kubernetes-based cloud native deployments came in, because there was a promise made earlier to the telco operators that OpenStack-based deployments could realize the same sort of cloud native benefits, be it scaling, observability, being able to orchestrate the networks. And then they realized that you cannot really realize those benefits using OpenStack-based deployments, primarily because the tools did not exist, and operators are also pretty hesitant to even share the same hardware between different applications. And now we're seeing that mindset sort of change, and also the tooling, which is available in the open source community for Kubernetes, will aid people who have not worked in the telco sector to actually enter the sector and aid the mobile operators or communication service providers to go through this journey of transitioning their network to cloud native. And as mentioned by the other panelists, picking the right vendor is picking the right processes, and also deciding what's the first step in going through this journey, the first application to go through this, and training themselves to actually get acquainted through this whole process is very critical, so that down the road, as they have a full network, I'm talking about the brownfield deployments, have almost majority of their networks transition to cloud native, that's when they would realize the full benefits of a proactively built network that can meet the benefits and use cases of 5G.
Yeah, Absolutely. Thanks, Bijoy. Okay, great insights there off the back of our poll results, and thanks to everybody for voting in that. Still a little time to be able to add your opinion there. So back over to you, Guy, for the next audience question.
Yep, thank you very much, Ray. And this question we've just had in the last few minutes, it's something of a roadmap question, really. Let me read the question out. A telco becoming a cloud-based service provider will no longer be a telco. It will be a cloud services company competing with the hyperscalers. What are the panelists' views on this? So, interesting question, goes a bit beyond cloud native, but it's certainly still an evolutionary roadmap type question. Any of our panelists want to start off on what it might mean, the longer term implications of this shift? Nathan, please. I'll come to you first and then over to Chris, but Nathan first.
Yeah, I maybe disagree with the statement a little bit, actually. I don't see us being first and foremost as telco operators attempting to get into the cloud service provider space. Cloudification is a means to the end for us. It's about making it easy, as I think some of the previous comments were made about, we wanted to make things faster. We wanted to make things cheaper. We wanted, to be more flexible. And I think that those things still exist and we still want those. And that's why we're going to cloud. That's why we're going to cloud native. I don't think the end goal is to become a cloud services operator. We may be able to do some of that. But in the end, our whole role is to provide services to our customer for communication services, and riding those on top of cloud infrastructure just happens to be the way to provide them cheaper and faster. And so I don't see us actually competing with hyperscalers in that sense. I think that we would be best to think about working with hyperscalers to help us meet those goals even quicker to get to that cloud native telco kind of utopia.
So it's still a different business. Thanks, Nathan, for those views. And let's go over to Chris to see if you agree with the questioner or like Nathan, you kind of disagree with the premise.
I think there's two aspects to it. Obviously, one aspect is the cloud journey for a telco. And I think a lot of companies started more like seeing cloud as a replacement, moving from on-prem into cloud solutions. Then the next step is more going deeper into cloud native, re-engineering some of the applications. And I see the trend going more towards multi-cloud, distributed cloud. And ultimately, if you like, cloud is a means to an end. So it's more like, so if you're using cloud to achieve your business outcomes. And I think at some point you will see like cloud becoming more pervasive, a bit like the fabric of the telco organization. So that's from that perspective. In terms of competing with hyperscalers, collaborating, I don't see a telco company really becoming a hyperscaler in itself. There's aspects, if you like, there's the service side of the telco, which can be more digitized, if you like, digitalized, more focusing on the cloud and the digital experience. Still, the network side has very specialized workloads, performance requirements, latency. You need to manage in a way distributed cloud to operate the network side of a telecom. And I think telecoms will get good at that aspect, but this doesn't mean they become at the same time hyperscalers.
Great. Thanks very much for those views, Chris. And let's get the view of a vendor now. So, Bijoy, what's your take on this question?
I would view it as trying to delineate between what the operators do and what hyperscalers do, and there's some overlap there as well. If you look at where the hyperscalers started, they started with infrastructure as a service, where you're providing servers, you're able to provide databases, and they've slowly started moving up the value chain to provide services as well. If you look at what Microsoft did with the acquisition of Affirmed and Maistre, they got into the application space with at least a packet core and IMFs. Versus you have AWS and Google. Google has their packet core for file servers, but it's very specific to one part of the network. Another area that we see the operators and hyperscalers now providing service, at least overlapping to some extent, is the private network space, because you see hyperscalers like Microsoft and Google and Amazon all launch services in the private network side, which still has dependency because you could only serve within a private small enterprise location, but you have to partner with the operator for providing the hybrid macro coverage. So that's one area where we see the hyperscalers moving up the value chain and being able to offer services. At the same time, on the operator side, it's always been about services. And it's about services to the consumer and enterprise, and infrastructure was just an enabler for them. Where except for maybe a few operators, global, very large operators who run their own data centers, like T-Systems as an example for DT's who sell data centers as a separate business, that's where you could see there's some overlap between what the hyperscalers and operators would compete with. But otherwise, I would look at it purely from what's the end service that each one of them is offering to their customer base.
Great. Thanks very much, everyone, for your comments on that question. We've still got about 8 or 10 minutes left. So, Ray, let's hand over to you and see what else we've received in.
Okay, thanks, Guy. Yeah, and here's a question just in the past few minutes. It's a short question, but it's a very big question. And the question is, what does moving network functionality to the cloud mean for customers? So what is the impact on customers, and I guess, consumers and enterprises, but I think maybe, the enterprise is really at the front of mind for the questioner here. What does moving network functionality to the cloud mean for the end customers? Does anybody want to come in here? Does it mean anything at all? Is there any change? I mean, we hear a lot from the industry about how, becoming moving more to the cloud, becoming more cloud native, introducing things like a standalone core is going to unleash a whole new raft of potential services to the industry. So anybody want to come in here and start a response to that question?
I would look at it differently for consumer versus enterprise. So you mentioned earlier about consumer. Consumer really won't care if you're running in a cloud native or a non-cloud native network. So to them, it's about what new service you could launch and the speed at which you could launch these new services. So if I'm on a non-cloud native, let's say a non-standalone network deployment, then I cannot offer services like a better experience for AR, VR through slicing as an implementation on the network side. So on the consumer side, I would say it's mostly about the services that the operator can bring to them, what new services and the speed at which you could launch those new services. On the enterprise side, it's a different story because the enterprise has always had services like SD-WAN, SASE, now SSE, and others, where you started to see more of the on-prem servers and services move to the cloud. So you could actually manage the services that the enterprise would do, be it CP services like firewalling or DPI services, which are all on-prem, and now you're moving to a cloud. And with the flexibility for cloud-native deployments, you could also have multi-cloud capabilities where the service that the enterprise is offering is not brought down by failure of one cloud, but you could actually have redundancy and disaster recovery schemes, or just services which come from multiple hyperscaler or operator environments. So I view the end use cases and implementation applicability slightly different for consumer versus the enterprises.
Yeah, thanks, Bijoy. And Randy, you wanted to come in with some thoughts here as well. I mean, is this move going to mean a difference for the kind of services that the customers might get from their communication service provider?
Yes, thank you. A little similar to Bijoy, I was thinking that more, not necessarily, of course, there's the services that 5G and 6G, as we get to it, would bring. But I think it's more around the speed at which those services can be deployed. And so I think that's where the real benefit will be, that they will be able to see, is how fast they're able to get these services that they haven't had before. And it's an interesting dilemma, because I think earlier in the discussion, we were talking about how carriers are not actually deploying as fast or as quickly as the cloud native type of architecture can give them. If some of them are still waiting 18 months to deploy software, then yes, that they're not getting those as the benefit of that cloud native type of architecture that allows you to deploy services quickly. So we have a long ways to go from that perspective as an industry. But the promise around this from an end user, whether it is consumer or enterprise, is the speed at which they're able to get new services coming to them for their benefit.
Yeah, great point, Randy. Thanks very much. And Nathan, we'll come to you to close off this question. What is this all going to mean for the customer base?
So I actually think it means a lot for the customer base, and I don't know if it necessarily matters whether they're enterprise or if they're consumer customers. I think that the transition to more of a cloud native deployment gives you a lot more flexibility when it comes to things like API based and being able to offer services that we may not have been able to do today with kind of modern APIs, being able to program the network more, being able to have developers actively be able to program, get information out of our networks, but also be able to take the information, we talked about observability before, but put that into a big data lake and actually start processing it, finding faults before they happen. So maybe our customers actually don't notice a difference, but that's because we're taking the thing and actually fixing the networks before it ever goes down for them, and gives them something that they may never see, they may never notice. But I think it is going to mean a lot as we make this transition towards cloud native telco.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nathan. And Chris, you wanted to come in here as well.
Yeah, just I think it's important. I mean, cloud native brings another way of architecting systems, if you like, brings this of, if you like, the concepts of microservices, APIs. In a way, this is essential, if you like, if we're going to move into this network as a service concept, because we need to invest a lot in software and how we abstract, the physical network resources into software, so we can sort of aggregate, integrate networks. We can provide flexibility around network slicing. So in a way, I think the architectural aspects of cloud native bring a lot of the discipline, a lot of the principles that are required to move into this sort of network as a service concept.
Okay, yeah, great point. Thanks, Chris. And Guy, do we have time to squeeze one more quick question in before we get thrown out of our own digital studio?
We just about do. We're almost out of time. We've only got about a couple of minutes left, but we have just received in a question that's rather specific to this panel and the panel we've just seen. And Nathan, this is a question that's more directed to you and your comments earlier. The question is, you mentioned that the end goal at Deutsche Telekom is to have a common infrastructure to run all workloads. And our viewer says, I'd be interested to know if you expect to have a common organization for all services as well. Nathan, is there any clarification you can give here?
Yeah, I mean, from Deutsche Telekom, we absolutely do. So we have, for our cloud, we have what we're calling a CIT, or our common infrastructure team. And at Deutsche Telekom, that team is looking to create this kind of common operating model, common layer to kind of have that singular cross-country, cross-operating company way of building the clouds and ensuring that they're operated in the same manner, while still making sure that the clouds in each country meet whatever regulatory, legal, and privacy requirements are needed there, but with one team providing all of the DevOps and the operations. So yeah, we're very much looking to go down that path.
Great. Thanks very much, Nathan. We would like to explore that further, but we are out of time. And as Ray says, we're in danger of being kicked out of our own virtual environment here. Thank you so much to all of our guests who joined us for this live program. And of course, to our audience for sending in all those questions. Believe it or not, we still have several remaining, and we'll try and get to those in our later program.
Yeah, and do remember to send in more questions for the live Q&A show as soon as you can. Don't leave it too late, because they do stack up. You get in too late, bottom of the pile, you might not make it. And also don't forget the poll question. There's still time for you to have your say and to influence the final outcome. So please vote now.
Yes, vote now, and please join Ray and me again in around about 40 minutes time for the final live Q&A show for today. And that's after our panel on the evolution of network functions from VNFs to CNFs, which is coming up very, very shortly. For now though, thank you for watching and goodbye.